Hello YouTube, Jughead98. Gonna make a short video today with some ride footage from yesterday. Really sloppy mud ride. We got, I would guess, about 1.5 to 2 inches of rain the day before this ride. Today we're riding a 2012 KTM 300 XC and a 2015 Beta 300 two-stroke. We had a lot of fun today, but just so I don't bore you guys to death with ride footage, I'm going to spend some time today talking about what little I have learned about tire choice, terrain, tube types, air pressure, all that fun stuff. So maybe with my 20 years of experience, maybe there'll be something to gain from what I've learned about tires. So to start out, there's 3 types of tires that I have used. There's your soft, a tire that I really prefer in the soft category is the Michelin S12, and about, I would say, 3 years ago it is transmuted into an XC, which is a more durable but less flexible compound. And where that has taken me, understanding how much more performance I can gain, knowing what type of carcass, sidewall, center wall, overall tire construction, I've learned how to manipulate tire pressure versus tire type to gain the most traction without having pinch flats or punctures. So what I mean by that is the Michelin S12 XC is a very durable tire. It has excellent traction, and when you can run it at low pressures in this type of mud like we're riding in today, it really performs phenomenally. Even on there's lots of exposed roots in the terrain that we're riding today, and that makes it very challenging when you go from tractable mud to very slippery roots that are in hills and things like that. Roots and rocks are majorly different with a soft compound tire. What I mean by that, wet roots are so slippery. And granted, a moss-covered rock is very slippery as well. But where we ride here in southern Indiana, wet roots in ruts create bumps in the middle of ruts because they don't get dug out like the rut does, if that makes any sense. So the point of all that is, if you have a tire that conforms to the root, kind of wraps around it, it makes a big difference in how well you can get over some obstacles. So let's get to it. What I've learned is, well, today I was using ultra heavy duty tube, and I had dropped all the way down to 4 pounds of pressure. And so with a very cold tire carcass, you have low pressure, but you have a very stiff tire to begin with. So you have to take into account your overall speed. What I had noticed riding with an S12 out west is I would run it 6 or 7 pounds like I did back home. But when I disassembled it, I noticed that the the tire had gotten very hot. The tube was stuck to the inside of the tire. They had almost melted together, and that was due to, number one, the temperatures being warm, and number two, going high speed with a very low pressure, and that meant that the friction had caused the tire to get hot, and in turn the tube to get very hot. But that's beside the point. Let's get through the tire types, and then we'll go back to pressures and things of that nature. So the S12XC, the Michelin, with the Michelin Ultra Heavy Duty tube, has been a good combination that I've used for the last 5 to 10 years. For an intermediate tire, I have experience with several. I used to run Dunlop 735. That was a great tire. Didn't wear as well as others. And for our use, we have a lot of mud here in southern Indiana more than anything, so I don't have a lot of experience with intermediate rear tires, but I do always run an intermediate tire in the front, just because we face such a variety between hard clay, rock, and really sloppy mud. I almost always have to use an intermediate tire for our area in the front. The tire I choose recently has been the Michelin M12. What is it? Is it M12? No. Yeah, I believe it's an M12. It's Michelin's intermediate to soft front, and it's okay. It's kind of hard. The compound's too hard. It doesn't flex much because they're using the XC compound in that front, and it's not the greatest. So I'm going to try the Golden Tire fat tire front and see how that goes, because I'm having a lot of front end washing on roots and the turns around here. And then the tire that I've tried the most recently on my dual sport, my Husqvarna FE501S, I recently mounted the Moto's Mountain Hybrid, which that is a cross between a knobby tire and a trials tire. So you get tall knobs but that are closely spaced, and a fairly soft durometer. What I mean by durometer is when you grab a hold of the knob. A durometer is a device used to quantify relative softness or hardness of rubber. And if you've been around tires very much, you can grab a hold of a dirt bike tire and flex the knobs and get a really good idea of relative hardness. The Moto's is somewhere in the middle. It's not very soft like a trials tire, and it's not really hard like an S12XC. The Moto's Mountain Hybrid works really well. It's really surprising. It works better than a knobby tire on everything but deep mud. And it's just incredible. It's incredible on wet roots. It's incredible on rocks. It's incredible on leaf-covered slop, as long as it's not very deep. If you get into more than 2 inches of mud, you know that, in my experience, which has been limited, but that Moto's Mountain Hybrid is just completely worthless. I tried to cross a ditch about a week ago with that tire, and it was muddy. I'm not going to say it was really muddy. But that tire just went to the bottom, wouldn't give me any drive. I didn't know if I was going to get out of the damn ditch. But everywhere else, it's phenomenal. I run it I've got it mounted up with a tubeless system, and I'll get into that. I'll get into more about the tubeless later in the video, but there's I run it with about 2 to 3 pounds, and it's unbelievable on everything but deep mud, and it's really poor in deep mud. I haven't tried it yet in sand, but I hear it's poor in sand as well. So that's going to make a great compromise for a dual sport, you know, so long as it's going to wear really well on the asphalt. It gets great traction on the asphalt. It gets great traction on almost all dirt conditions. But if you have to go through deep mud, it's going to be really, really bad in my experience. So let's move on to types of tubes and not tubes that I've used that have worked. Started out using standard tubes that are fairly lightweight. They're fairly flimsy. They work okay so long as you want to run fairly normal tire pressures. So in the middle of the summer here in southern Indiana, it usually gets pretty dry, and you take your rear tire up to around 10, maybe even 11 pounds of pressure, so that you can corner at higher speeds, so that, you know, the sidewall of the tire doesn't fold over when you put a load on it, because the traction is there, you know, so you want the pressure so the sidewall doesn't fold. And then the standard tube is fine for standard pressures, honestly. They work great. But if you want to start running, you know, when it gets really muddy, if you want to run 4 or 5 pounds, you need, I use the Michelin Ultra Heavy Duty tube. And what that means is, the reason I use that, if you're going to run low pressures, you have to have a tube that can handle, you know, say you're going along a pretty good little clip and you smack a sharp edge rock. If you can picture it, that whole tire is gonna, it's like folding, it's like, picture holding a water balloon, and you push that water balloon up against a sharp edge, it gets folded, and in the fold you've got the wheel rim. So it's basically putting the wheel rim between the tire, you know, the tube sandwiched between the tire and the wheel rim. And when you smack something sharp edged, it puts a hole, that wheel rim puts a hole in your tube. And when you use, I've noticed, if you're going to run ultra heavy duty tubes, I would recommend you use, a lot of people use talcum powder. I prefer to use grease. And yeah, it's messy, but the grease allows that tube to move around inside the tire when it gets pinched like that. And I've had much less pinch flats using grease. And moving on from ultra heavy duty tubes, then you've got the new system that I just tried last month. It's called the tubeless. And it's basically the most simple way to put it is a bicycle inner tube on the inside with it almost looks like a little bicycle tire on the outside, and you mount that to the inside of your rim, and that gives you 2 valve stems, and you mount the tire over that, and then you inflate the bicycle tube, and that locks the tire bead to the rim all the way around, 360 degrees of tire lock. And that also creates an airtight seal between the inside of the tire and the tubeless. So the inner style tube gives you some rim protection as well, along with having that 360 degree rim lock. It doesn't allow that tire to come off the bead when you square edge. That's something I forgot to mention about inner tubes is when you're running 4 to 5 psi and you hit a good hard square edge, there's not enough pressure to keep that tire on the bead a lot of times. So the tire kind of pinches off the outside of the bead and down into the tire. Just because there's not enough pressure in the tube to keep the tire on the bead. With the tubeless, that tire is on the bead guaranteed even at 0 psi, which provides a lot of rim protection, and there's no way to get a pinch flat. But that said, the tubeless was literally off and on I probably spent 3 hours trying to get that tubeless to seal correctly. To seal air in the tire portion between the tubeless and the tire. So there's 2 inflation valves, one for the tubeless system to lock the tire on the bead, and then another to add air to the tire itself. And the tubeless system would not hold air in the tire. It was leaking air from around the bead, and I jacked with it and jacked with it and jacked with it for days, and finally called the owner. He was very helpful and said that he had found 125 psi when the tire and the system is cold, like it was 30 degrees, would provide for a better seal. So I decided I was going to take his advice, but I decided to go a step further and actually just soak the tire in hot water in my bathtub.
Yeah, that little uphill log, I've gotten it before, so I went up and I tried to wheelie it. I got all wheel spin and just tanked over it.
I got over it okay, but when I hit the other side, I was in a mud rut.
Yeah, right in that rut.
Oh, that was fun.